This is a song that I learned from the gospel opry band that I sing with and have sung with for about 11 years. It's called God on the Mountain, and I hope you like it. It's got a wonderful, wonderful message.
Life is easy when you're up on the mountain and you've got peace of mind that you've never known. But then things change when you're down in the valley. But don't lose hope, because you're never alone. For the God on the mountain is still God in the valley. When things go wrong, they'll be set right. And the God of the good times is still God in the bad times. And the God of the day is still God of the night. You talk of faith when you're up on the mountain. Oh, but talk comes so easy when life's at its best. But it's down in the valley of trials and temptations, and that's where your faith is really put to the test. 'Cause the God of the mountain is still God in the valley. When things go wrong, oh, they will be made right. And the God of the good times is still God in the bad times. And the God of the day is still God of the night. And the God of the day is still God of the night. Yeah.
Thank you, Carol. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
And remember, only rule of sharing, like we say in the discussion groups, is that you don't have to believe, you don't have to agree, you don't have to accept anything I'm talking about. I'm simply offering to you what I feel and experience is the truth about who we really are and how we see each other and what our true purpose is here on earth. But it's not about shoving a certain belief or my belief on you or anybody, or hitting you over the head with a book and assuming that I'm right and you're wrong. We see a lot of that going on in the world right now, and it always has gone on in the world. And how's it working for us in terms of actually finding permanent peace and permanent solutions to conflict? If we're honest with ourselves, it does not work. And the only true solution to conflict is really looking within at the source of the belief that you out there is separate and apart from me in here. That's the core belief of all of our conflicts that very few of us here on earth, if we identify as just earthly beings, ever really get to. Because it's just easier and more convenient to project blame and the source of problems and conflicts as being apart and outside of us, where we have no control or influence over it. That's the part of the setup in this world's belief system to keep us in perennial rat race of conflicts, of never-ending strife. And we're here to hear something else, just to be open to it And I trust with complete certainty that Spirit will take it exactly to our point of understanding. So let's jump right to it. Speaking of which, so in this time that we've had off, I've spent a lot of time going inward to process things, whether it's the virus or the conflicts and the conversations regarding race right now in our country. Because I know when I go back to work as a public school teacher, I know they're going to require us to do trainings and diversity and discrimination awareness and all of that fun stuff is going to be required. So I've been thinking a lot about how to interact with that when I go back to work in plain language, not to be technical Course in Miracles language or any spiritual language, as much as plain language to be able to share what our purpose is and all of that. So what I came up with and what Spirit came up with to share was that at a most basic level, when we're looking out at the world of fear, of division, of strife, at a most basic human level, the worst thing that we can do as individuals is to assume that the problem is with bad guy out there. The problem is with bad cop out there, bad police department, bad institution, bad protesters, bad looters, and people that are taking advantage of the situation, committing crime rampantly. Problem, bad guy, problem, bad guy, problem, bad guy, problem, bad guy out there, and stop there. That's the worst thing that we can do. That's the least effective thing that we can do as individuals. Not that we don't take a stand on what we prefer as far as situations in the world. But really the fast track, the shortcut to solving all of this strife in our effective real worlds around us and our brothers and sisters that we interact with, that we deal with, that we see, that we feel with, that we work with, that we live with, strangers, that we come in contact with, our real world in essence around us that we affect every day. The most effective direct way to change our world really is to recognize that those same hateful, racist, prejudiced, separatist feelings that I see out in the world, that I have them in my mind at some level. If I'm recognizing a racist or a prejudiced or a separatist, a hateful thought outside of me, even though I might not be committing a hateful physical act on someone, the core belief that we're separate and I have to hate somebody based on a difference is the same belief that I'm sharing in my mind if I believe that people are somehow different from me based on a difference. It's the same belief that I share in my mind at some subtle level. I don't have to go out and commit a physical act to have those same hateful, prejudicial thoughts that we were all conditioned into. All of us in here, if we were born and raised on this planet, on some subtle level, we've accumulated a racist or a prejudiced or a sexist or some sort of prejudicial thought against some group based on a difference, all of it rooted in our core belief in our unworthiness, that we're not worthy of acceptance, we're not worthy of love, that we have to seek it in a world outside of us. And so we end up projecting that unworthiness and self-hatred on things outside of us based on a convenient scapegoat, which in our country's case, race has been one of them, among others. But it all boils down to self-hatred, a feeling of innate unworthiness, a feeling of being undeserving of wholeness, of lovingness, of acceptance within. And so we conveniently project it out and wonder why the world runs in continual conflict that it does. So the most purposeful thing, I feel that we all have the true purpose for being here with each other in our effective worlds around us, is to really notice those things outside of us in the hateful acts that we might be seeing out there in the world on either side of these conflicts. And remember that those same hateful, separatist, prejudicial thoughts that I see out there on some level I pick them up in my mind. And it does not make us bad or guilty or sinful to admit to ourselves that I have racist or prejudiced or somehow hateful thoughts in my mind at some level that I picked up. It doesn't make us bad or guilty or sinful to do that. Quite the opposite. It makes us willing to want to see past those thoughts. It makes us willing to want to lay those thoughts down and experience the perfect light of God that we are. But we have to be willing to recognize them so we can be aware of them when they come up. It does no good to sit there and just project blame outside of us without recognizing, hey, that stuff that I see out in the world, I've got some connection to that hatred in my mind at some level that I picked up in my many years here on earth. It doesn't make us bad or guilty or sinful to admit the hatred that we've accumulated here in our time on earth. It makes us willing to want to lay those thoughts down and to be able to see the light of truth that we all are, that ultimately is the only thing that can bring us together. But it takes a lot of willingness to go inward to do that. That's why these conflicts have persisted the way they have for hundreds of years in this country alone, and for all eternity, as long as people have been on this earth. And they're not going away. Don't be fooled that this is some massive awakening in our conscience. I don't feel that. I think that the people who are awakening during this time have already laid the foundation for years before this happened to be able to use this time of upheaval to accelerate their awakening. But don't be fooled that the masses of people taken to the street are awakening in conscience simply because of this current situation now. This is just another tactic by our ego world belief system to keep us embroiled in projecting blame outside of us where we can't find any solution. Those of us that are using this time of conflict and upheaval to awaken further have already started that process long before this happened. And those of you that lived during the time of the civil rights movement in the 70s and the women's liberation movement, we had the race riots in Miami in the 70s, Rodney King in Los Angeles in the early 90s. This is nothing new, but now because of we're so fixated on the spectacle of things, and I'm completely not downplaying the events that occur that people get angry. I'm not downplaying. What I'm saying is that this is nothing new. This is what the ego belief system does to keep us in conflict. This is nothing new. Don't be fooled that this is somehow radically some new problem. No, this is what the ego does to get our attention, to take sides, and to keep us embroiled in separation from each other and apart from our God identity, which is one. So our purpose really with each other, our only purpose for being here really is to go to the root of all of our problems, all of them, which at a core is that we are unworthy of our true identity in God, which is free of any conflict, and to recognize that outwardly with our brothers and sisters. At a most practical level, do we have to agree with anything in the world? No, absolutely not. At a most practical level, do we have to go along with anybody or agree with the things that are going on that we might not feel comfortable with? No, absolutely not. Being in a place of receptivity to the Holy Spirit, to the Christ in all of us, does not mean being a doormat, right, Tomas? It does not. It simply means standing firm with your feet affixated in the truth of who we are, the light of who we are, not being fixated on the differences of who we are. I'm a body, this color, you're that sex. It really takes a lot of discipline to get away from the physical differences as our primary identity and go back to our God-given truth. We have to be willing. We have to be willing to go back to the source of our creation to be able to free ourselves. And that really summarizes our purpose for being here with each other. And I was sharing yesterday with a brother who was sharing with me about his ongoing relationship dramas and how difficult it is to connect with people. This is a brother who, to me, he identifies himself as a conservative, and that he's tried to connect with women who are, quote, liberal, and that it hasn't worked. And I sat back and asked him, well, I said, well, that was in the past, that's up to now, but have you considered moving forward that you might be limiting yourself if you only affixate to certain criteria that you've learned might work for you, because it hadn't worked so far. So moving forward, have you considered that there might be another world out there other than categories which you've learned? My point being is that the title of the talk, Don't Settle for Mediocre. Whether we get tied to our past and our conditioning, like we said earlier, our conditioning about who we are as an identity, how we feel separate, how we feel joined with each other. Whether if we tie ourselves to the past and all of our conditioning, which most of us would admit is pretty dysfunctional on many levels, because the upsets that we've had over the years seem to keep recurring over and over again. The feelings of inadequacy, of unworthiness, of depression seem to kind of recur in our lives because we're repeating a belief system about ourselves that support unworthiness and inadequacy and depression. So could it be that there's another way to see who we really are as an identity that might free us up from the shackles of the past that has not worked, if we're honest with ourselves, in delivering our peace, our unconditional joy right now, if we're honest with ourselves? Could it be that there's another way of seeing who we are as beings that might free us up from the shackles of the past, that keeps us in line, that keeps us in categories, that keeps us separate and apart from each other, that keeps us separate from possibilities out there in the world if we slowly start to let go of assuming that we know how to live our lives based on the conditioning that we accumulated. So the mediocre happiness which we've accumulated, which we're seeing in this world of conflict now, based in a thinking that other things and people and conditions, laws, policies outside of me that I have no control over have to change in order for me to be okay, in order for me to have peace. We've tried that for many years, and I'm not against all laws when it comes to trying to have correction. I'm not against that. What I'm saying, we've tried that for many, many, many years, and we seem to have the same recurring conflicts out here as a society, just as much as the same recurring conflicts inward as a person, as an individual. So is there something else that we can learn to help us to see things differently, to lay down our assumption that we know anything, especially about how to be truly, truly happy and truly unconditionally joyful? That doesn't depend on anything, any condition or law or person or structure or people complying or people agreeing with us for us to feel whole and for us to feel complete. So I invite you to reconsider the source of our problems as a whole, to identify with those problems as being rooted in our minds somewhere, and to remember that it does not make you bad or guilty or sinful to admit some of those hateful things that we have in our minds, but it makes us very willing and powerful to be able to recognize them and lay them down. Because we deserve to feel whole, we deserve to feel complete, we deserve to feel completely unconditionally joyful and full, because that's who we are. But it takes a lot of work in cleaning out the junk and being honest with ourselves about the amount of junk that we've accumulated. So much junk that many of us are unaware of the junk that we've accumulated that is covering over our God-given life. It takes a lot of willingness to go in there and clean that out. But I invite you to use the support, to use the unconditional force and power around you to be able to uncover the God-given perfection that you are, because that is who you are and you deserve to feel who you really are. So thank you. Thank you for taking the time to come.
And I'd like to close the service today with our song, I Am So Blessed. Take this opportunity to go within and realize all that you do have in your life. A lot of times we spend too much time looking out at what we don't have. But we've got so much, and we're so blessed. So join me in song with this if you'd like to. Stand up if you'd like.
So blessed, I am so blessed, I am so grateful for all that I have. I am so blessed, I am so blessed, I am so grateful, I am so blessed, I am so blessed.